My name's Elena Whitmore, 35 years old, U.S. Army veteran, 12 years in service, honorable discharge. You'd think after a dozen years serving your country, the world might cut you some slack. Turns out, not really. The day I got kicked out of my sister's house was the same day I realized family loyalty has an expiration date, especially when money's involved. After I left the military, I came back to Arlington, Virginia, thinking I'd start fresh. Civilian life hit harder than any deployment I'd ever had. My sister, Rebecca, was the one person I thought I could rely on. She'd built a real estate business while I was overseas. She was always the pretty one, the charming one, the one our parents bragged about. I was the quiet one who knew how to dismantle a rifle blindfolded. She liked attention. I liked structure. We were different, but we were sisters. Or at least I thought we were. When Mom and Dad passed away, they left us their house and some savings. Rebecca took charge of everything, the estate, the paperwork, the funeral arrangements. She told me not to worry, that she'd handle it all. "You've done enough, soldier," she said. "You should rest." It sounded kind at the time. Later, I realized that was her way of saying, stay out of it. For a while, I did. I stayed in her guest room, tried to figure out what came next. I'd applied for a few jobs, engineering firms, defense contractors, but civilian hiring managers looked at my resume like it was written in another language. Military leadership doesn't translate well when the person interviewing you has never been yelled at by a drill sergeant. I spent months sending applications and hearing nothing back. One night at dinner, Rebecca brought up an investment she wanted to make. A big real estate project in D.C. Something about luxury condos for military families. She wanted me to invest my share of the inheritance. I told her no. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't want to hand over everything I had without understanding it. She laughed. Not the cute sisterly kind, the kind that says, "You'll regret that." The next morning she came downstairs with my duffel bag already packed. "You're serious about not helping me?" she said. "I can't have you living here rent-free if you're not even supporting the family business." I blinked at her, thinking it was a joke. "Rebecca, I've been looking for work. You told me to take time to adjust." She crossed her arms. "I said rest, not freeload. You've been back for almost a year, Elena. You're not in the Army anymore. You can't just bark orders and expect the world to salute." That one stung. I told her she was being unfair. She said I was being entitled. Within 5 minutes, we weren't even speaking like sisters anymore, just two people throwing every past resentment at each other like grenades. I remember her exact words before she turned her back. "You walk out that door, and you're on your own. Nobody wants a broken soldier who can't move on." I grabbed my duffel, my discharge papers, and whatever was left of my pride. When the door slammed behind me, I realized I had nowhere to go. The house I grew up in wasn't mine anymore. The woman who used to braid my hair before school now looked at me like a burden. I slept in my car that night. It wasn't as bad as it sounds, at least not the first time. I'd slept in worse places overseas. At least in Virginia, there weren't mortars going off in the distance. But there's something uniquely humiliating about sitting in a Walmart parking lot, staring at your own reflection in the rearview mirror, realizing you've hit the kind of rock bottom they don't show in recruitment ads. Over the next few weeks, I tried everything. Security jobs, construction work, consulting gigs. Nobody wanted to hire a veteran without a college degree or corporate experience. My military record said I'd supervised weapons development logistics for 10 years, but all they saw was no office background. Every morning, I'd shower at the gym, grab coffee at a 7-Eleven, and pretend I was just between apartments. By week 3, even that lie got hard to sell to myself. I started selling my old medals online. Not the service ribbons or anything sentimental, just the extra pins, the stuff collectors liked. It paid for gas and instant noodles. Meanwhile, Rebecca's name started popping up in local news. Rebecca Whitmore, Arlington's rising real estate star. She was smiling in photos in front of houses. She'd flipped houses she probably bought with money that used to be half mine. One interview caught me off guard. The reporter asked about family. Rebecca smiled sweetly and said, "My sister's been struggling. I tried to help, but she doesn't want to change." I was sitting in my car when I heard that on the radio. The interviewer laughed politely, and Rebecca giggled like it was some cute family anecdote. I turned off the radio before I threw something at it. For For the first time in my life, I felt truly disposable. The Army trained me to survive in hostile environments, but nothing prepared me for being ignored by everyone I thought would care. Some nights, I'd park near the river because the sound of water helped me sleep. Some nights, I'd just drive until sunrise. The car became my world, a storage unit, a bedroom, a shelter. Every so often, I'd check my email, hoping one of the dozens of job applications had gone somewhere. They hadn't. There was a point where I almost went back to Rebecca's house. Not to beg, just to see if she'd changed her mind. But I knew how that would go. She'd open the door with that look of satisfaction, the look people get when they think life proved them right. I couldn't give her that. One morning I woke up in a parking lot outside an old industrial building. I hadn't realized I'd parked near a dumpster. The smell hit me before I even opened my eyes. My first thought was, so this is what rock bottom smells like. My second thought was, maybe I can find something in there worth selling. I popped the trunk, pulled on an old pair of gloves, and started digging. It's funny how quickly you stop caring about dignity once survival takes over. I'd done harder things. I'd been shot at, chased, stranded. This was just a different kind of battlefield. A broken lamp, a stack of magazines, a busted chair. I kept thinking maybe I'd find something I could clean up and flip online. Half of survival is believing there's something left to find. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Not the heavy kind, more like cautious ones, heels clicking on concrete. I straightened up, holding what used to be a chair leg, ready to swing if I had to. A woman in a gray suit stood a few feet away, holding a folder. Her hair was perfectly neat, her shoes definitely cost more than my car. She looked at me calmly and said, "Excuse me, are you Elena Whitmore?" I blinked, not sure I'd heard right. "Depends who's asking," I said, still holding the chair leg like a weapon. She smiled slightly. "My name is Victoria Chen. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Colonel William Langley." For a moment, I thought she had the wrong person. Then that name hit me, Colonel Langley, my old commanding officer. The man who used to call me Lieutenant Whitmore, the only engineer who could out-stubborn a tank. I hadn't heard his name in years. Victoria continued, her voice steady, professional. "Colonel Langley passed away 6 weeks ago. He left instructions for me to find you personally. I didn't know what to say. I'd saved that man's life once, back in Afghanistan. He'd promised he'd repay the favor someday, but I never believed people meant that kind of thing. Not really." Victoria glanced at my car, then back at me. "Perhaps we could talk somewhere more comfortable," she said. I looked down at my dirty jeans, at the dumpster behind me, and laughed under my breath. "Lady, unless you've got a coffee shop in that folder, this is as comfortable as it gets." She didn't laugh. She just said calmly, "Miss Whitmore, you're the sole heir to Colonel Langley's estate." I froze. "His what?" Victoria handed me the folder. Inside were photos, legal papers, and one unbelievable sentence. Estimated total assets, $47 million. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating from dehydration. But the seal, the letterhead, everything looked real. And that was the moment standing next to a dumpster, holding a chair, leg, and a folder worth more than I could imagine, when my life pivoted so hard it made my head spin. Victoria said softly, "He wanted you to have everything, but there's a condition." She didn't say what it was yet. She just looked at me, like she needed to see what kind of person I'd become before she told me. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something I hadn't felt since I left the Army. A reason to stand up straight. The folder in my hands felt heavier than it should have. My palms were dirty, my nails chipped, and the papers inside were worth more than I'd ever seen in my life. I didn't even know how to react. Victoria watched me quietly, waiting for some kind of response, but my mind was stuck between disbelief and panic. The last time someone said my name with that much formality, I was standing in front of a commanding officer about to get shipped overseas. "Miss Whitmore," she said again, "you should sit down." I wanted to laugh. Where? The curb or the dumpster lid? She didn't flinch. That's when I realized she was serious, calm in a way only lawyers and bomb technicians ever are. She handed me a business card, then motioned toward a black Mercedes parked nearby. "Please, let's at least talk in the car." Every instinct told me this could be some elaborate scam. But something about her voice, the confidence, the precision, didn't sound like someone fishing for a quick con. So I followed. The car smelled like leather and sanity. I hadn't been inside anything that clean in months. As we drove, I flipped through the documents. Property deeds, corporate papers, bank account statements with more zeros than I'd ever imagined existed in one place. Victoria explained everything like she'd rehearsed it 100 times. Colonel Langley had passed 6 weeks earlier after a short illness. He'd left behind his company, Langley Defense Systems, one of the smaller private contractors that had worked with the military for decades. He had no children, no spouse, no living relatives, just me. I stared at the signature at the bottom of his will. It was his handwriting. Sharp. Exact. The same signature that used to approve my leave forms years ago. I wanted to believe it, but my brain kept trying to find the trick. People like me didn't just inherit millions from dead colonels. Not in real life. I asked her, "Why me?" He said, "You saved his life. Afghanistan, 2013. My throat tightened. I remembered it too well. A convoy ambush, a flipped Humvee, the colonel trapped inside while ammo cooked off in the back. I dragged him out while the vehicle burned. He told me afterward, "You'll never need to pay for a drink again, Lieutenant." I told him I preferred cash. We laughed. I never saw him again after that deployment. Victoria looked at me. He meant it. We pulled up to a hotel in downtown Arlington. Not the kind of place people like me stayed in. She got out, opened the door and said, "There's a room ready for you. Hot shower, food, clothes. We'll talk more in the morning." I hesitated. "You sure this isn't a mistake?" "Colonel Langley wasn't a man who made mistakes," she said. The hotel lobby looked like another planet. The staff didn't know what to do with someone who looked like me. Hair tangled, jeans ripped, eyes hollow. I kept waiting for someone to stop me and say there'd been a misunderstanding. Nobody did. When I got to the room, I locked the door and leaned against it for a full minute before moving. The bed looked like heaven. I hadn't slept on anything that soft in almost a year. The first thing I did was take a shower. I watched months of grime swirl down the drain and thought, this can't be real. Then came the hard part, facing the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Cheekbones too sharp, eyes too tired. The army had taught me discipline, pride, posture. Homelessness taught me how to disappear. I sat on the bed and spread the papers out. The more I read, the clearer it became. It wasn't a joke. This was legitimate. Langley had planned every detail, down to the minute Victoria would find me. One line in the will stopped me cold. "My estate and company shall go to Elena Whitmore on the condition that she assumes the role of Chief Executive Officer for 1 calendar year. CEO. That word looked ridiculous next to my name. I didn't sleep much that night. My brain ran through every scenario. Maybe it was a setup. Maybe the company was in debt. Maybe Langley had enemies. Hell, maybe Rebecca was behind this somehow. Paranoia is an old habit. It keeps you alive in war, but it kills your peace afterward. When morning came, there was a knock on the door. Room service. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, real coffee. I almost cried. The last proper breakfast I'd had was at a VFW hall 6 months earlier. At exactly 8 a.m., Victoria arrived looking just as composed as yesterday. "Ready to head to New York?" "New York?" I asked, mouth half full of bacon. "The company headquarters. Colonel Langley's will requires you to meet the board in person." I wiped my hands on a napkin and stared at her. "You're serious?" "Deadly." That's when I noticed her briefcase. Neatly organized, color-coded tabs, even a pen clipped at a perfect angle. The kind of woman who'd never misplace a thing. If she said we were flying to New York, we were flying to New York. 2 hours later, I was sitting on a private jet, wearing clothes someone had bought for me overnight. My brain couldn't catch up. Yesterday, I was digging through trash. Today, I was sipping orange juice at 30,000 feet. I asked Victoria if she knew what the Colonel's company actually did these days. "They develop tactical systems and drone guidance software," she said. "Mostly R&D contracts with the Department of Defense. Profitable and respected. But since his passing, there's been uncertainty." "Uncertainty?" She glanced at me. "Some of the board members have been ambitious. They expect you to refuse the position." I snorted. "Yeah, can't imagine why they'd think that." She smiled faintly. "They don't know you yet." When the plane landed, I expected to see some gray corporate building. Instead, a car took us to a tall glass tower in Midtown Manhattan, with the Langley Defense logo shining near the top. I'd seen that logo before, back when I was in uniform, printed on equipment crates and supply trucks. Walking into that building as the supposed owner felt unreal. Employees stopped mid-conversation when they saw me. Some recognized me from military articles the colonel had shared years ago. Others whispered. I caught bits of it. That's her? The vet? Like I'd just walked into someone else's movie. The boardroom was everything you'd imagine. Long table, suits, arrogance. 8 people sat waiting. Most were older, male, and clearly unimpressed. Victoria did the introductions, crisp and professional. Gentlemen, this is Miss Elena Whitmore, the new CEO of Langley Defense Systems, as appointed by Colonel Langley's will. One man leaned back in his chair, smirking. With all due respect, Miss Whitmore, do you even have experience running a corporation? I looked him dead in the eye. With all due respect, sir, I've coordinated logistics for live combat operations in 3 countries. If I can manage ammunition, personnel, and chaos under fire, I think I can handle a few spreadsheets. The room went silent for a moment. Then another board member, a woman this time, asked what my plans were for the company. I didn't have a clue yet, so I said the truth. My plan is to learn everything I can as fast as I can and to honor the man who built this place. If that's a problem, speak now. No one did. Afterward, Victoria told me I handled it well. I told her I was bluffing half the time. She said, so was everyone else in that room. By the time we got to the car, my head was spinning. Yesterday, I'd been homeless. Today, I had a corner office. It felt like some strange social experiment, drop a soldier into corporate America and see what happens. Still, I couldn't shake one question. Why did Langley pick me, of all people, to run a company worth tens of millions? He could have left it to a partner, a friend, anyone more qualified. As the car rolled past the skyline, I looked out the window, trying to convince myself this was happening. The buildings stretched high and cold against the sky towers of steel and power, built by people who'd never had to sleep in a car. I didn't know what came next, but one thing was certain. Whatever game Langley started with this inheritance, I was already in it. The first week at Langley Defense felt like a deployment to a place where nobody spoke my language. Everything smelled like polished floors and expensive coffee. Every desk had a motivational quote taped to the monitor, the kind that made me want to roll my eyes. Innovate with integrity. Courage drives progress. In the Army, integrity meant not getting your squad killed. Here it meant saying synergy during a meeting without vomiting. Victoria had arranged for me to move into a temporary apartment near the office, some corporate housing with furniture too clean to touch. She said it would help me adjust. Adjust was lawyer, speak for try not to embarrass us in public. Every day started with a briefing from Victoria, who had now become part lawyer, part babysitter. You'll meet with the senior engineers today, she said one morning. They'll expect you to know nothing, but pretend you know something. Got it, I said. Standard military tactic. She smiled, probably for the first time since I met her. Exactly, I said. The engineering division looked more like NASA than a defense company, glass walls, blueprints everywhere, a bunch of people in lab coats arguing about flight algorithms. That's where I met Marcus Hale, the chief technical officer. Early 40s, sharp jawline, sleeves rolled up, looked like someone who didn't have time for small talk. He didn't shake my hand when Victoria introduced us. You're the new CEO? He asked, like he couldn't quite believe it. Last I checked, I said. He gave me a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Colonel Langley mentioned you once. Said you had a habit of asking too many questions. Guess that's why I'm here, I said. He didn't laugh, but I saw a flicker of something. Maybe curiosity, maybe judgment. He led me through the lab, pointing at prototypes and simulation screens. Drones, targeting systems, defensive AI. I understood half of it, but I nodded like I understood all of it. Langley had always said Marcus was brilliant, maybe too brilliant for his own good. I could see what he meant. The man didn't waste words, didn't show weakness, which, in corporate speak, made him dangerous. Later that afternoon, I sat through a meeting with the finance team, a room full of suits with graphs that looked like modern art. One guy kept talking about shareholder confidence, as if it were a living creature that needed to be fed. Finally, I interrupted. Can someone explain to me in plain English what the hell we actually make money from? The room went quiet. A younger analyst cleared his throat, primarily from software licensing to the Department of Defense and hardware partnerships with Falcon Dynamics. The name hit me like a cold wind. Falcon Dynamics. I'd heard that name before back when Langley warned us about them. He said they played dirty, the kind of company that smiled in public and bribed in private. I leaned forward. And how's that partnership going? The analyst hesitated. It's steady. They've been pushing for a merger proposal since the colonel passed. Of course they had. A powerful company waiting for the old man to die so they could swoop in and take everything. The timing was too neat. After the meeting, I asked Victoria if she knew about Falcon's interest. She did, and she wasn't happy about it. They've been circling for months. The colonel rejected every offer. Now they're back, assuming you'll sell. Then they don't know me, I said. That night, I stayed in the office long after everyone left. The city lights glowed outside the window like a battlefield of glass and neon. I read through the colonel's old emails, contracts, and project notes. He'd been working on something classified before he died, a drone control AI called Vigilant. The test reports ended abruptly 3 days before his death. Something felt off. Too many missing pages. Too many files unavailable. While digging through the archives, I found a memo marked Confidential, Internal Audit. The sender's name froze me. Rebecca Whitmore. I opened it. It was an old correspondence between her and a Falcon Dynamics executive. The tone was friendly, too friendly. They'd met to discuss shared interests and potential cooperation. Rebecca, my sister, the same woman who threw me out, was somehow linked to the company trying to swallow Langley Defense. I read the email 3 times, hoping I was wrong. But there it was, her signature, her tone, her smug phrasing. I could almost hear her voice in my head. It's just business, Elena. Don't take it personally. I shut the laptop, heart pounding. For the first time since I inherited the company, I understood why Langley's will came with that one condition. He hadn't chosen me just to reward me. He'd chosen me to protect something he couldn't anymore. The next morning, Victoria noticed I hadn't slept. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said. Close enough, I replied. I told her about the email. Her eyes sharpened immediately. Are you sure it's her? I showed her the message. She didn't say a word for a long moment. Then she said, if that's true, we're not dealing with a simple corporate takeover. We're looking at insider collusion. Maybe worse. Marcus walked in right then, like fate, had perfect comedic timing. Morning, he said, grabbing a file. Everything okay? Victoria quickly changed the subject. I didn't. Marcus, how much do you know about Falcon Dynamics? He raised an eyebrow. Enough to stay cautious. Why? They've got their claws deeper in here than I thought. He sighed, like he'd been expecting me to say that. Then you better start thinking like a CEO, not a soldier. I shot him a look. Trust me, I can do both. He didn't argue. He just nodded slightly, as if he was quietly reassessing me. Later that day, a courier delivered a sealed envelope addressed to me. No return address, just my name typed neatly on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 words printed in bold. You're not safe here. No signature, no clue who sent it. I showed it to Victoria. She frowned. Could be a threat, or could be a warning. Either way, it means someone's watching you. That. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the paper. A few weeks ago, I was invisible. Now, apparently, I was worth threatening. Progress, I guess. That night, I stayed in the office again, reviewing security footage, trying to piece together who might have sent it. At 11 p.m., the cleaning crew came through, except one guy lingered longer than usual near my desk. I checked the footage twice. The man was wearing a maintenance uniform, but his badge didn't match any employee records. The next morning, security confirmed the badge was fake. Someone had been inside the building, close enough to leave that note on my desk without anyone noticing. Victoria wanted to call the police. I told her not to. I'd handled worse. If they're watching, I said, then let's give them something to watch. Marcus overheard and gave me that same half-interested look. You planning a trap, or just being reckless? Both, I said. He smiled for real that time. Good. Maybe you'll fit in here after all. By noon, I'd called an emergency board meeting. Everyone looked nervous. I announced a full internal audit of contracts, financial records, and external communications. Half the room protested. The other half stayed quiet. That told me everything I needed to know about who might be hiding something. When the meeting ended, I caught Marcus by the elevator. If you were trying to sabotage a defense company, where would you start? He didn't even hesitate. Supply chain. It's where money leaks and secrets travel. I nodded. Then that's where I'll start. He gave me a long look, like he wanted to say something but didn't. Be careful, Whitmore. People who dig too deep around here tend to disappear. I almost laughed. Story of my life. He smirked. Then I guess you'll do fine. When he walked away, I looked down at the folder, still in my hand, the Colonel's will, now creased and worn at the edges. Somewhere between his death and my arrival, something had gone very wrong inside this company. And if my sister was part of it, she had no idea what kind of fight she'd started. The more I looked through Langley's files, the more I understood the man had built his company like a fortress, layers of security, backup systems, coded notes that only made sense if you'd served under him. He'd trusted few people, which meant if he left everything to me, he expected me to be one of the few who wouldn't sell it off or screw it up. That trust felt heavier than the inheritance itself. Victoria showed up early the next morning with coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She didn't waste time with small talk. We need to go over the details of the condition, she said, sliding a folder across my desk. I opened it, half expecting something bureaucratic like a tax form. Instead, there was a single-page letter from Langley, written in his own handwriting, sharp, neat, no wasted words. Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. You always had more backbone than sense, which is why I'm leaving you something that requires both. This company has been built on service, not greed. If you can lead it for 1 year, it's yours. If you can't, it goes to those who served and have nothing left. You'll be tested by men in suits, by ghosts from your past, and by your own fear. Trust the people who earn it, never the ones who ask for it. No signature, just his name typed below, like he knew handwriting could be forged. I looked at Victoria. So that's it? Run a company for a year and I get $47 million? Roughly, she said. Minus taxes. I laughed under my breath. That's the most American sentence I've ever heard. Victoria didn't laugh. He meant what he wrote, Elena. The board can't remove you for 12 months, but if you resign, or if the company goes bankrupt under your leadership, the inheritance defaults to the Veterans Relief Trust. So basically, I can't screw up. She smiled faintly. Not unless you want to make some very poor veterans very rich. It was meant as a joke, but it landed like a warning. Later that day, I sat in Langley's old office, a room that still smelled faintly of cigars and brass polish. The desk was enormous, the view dizzying. I couldn't help picturing him sitting there, the same man who'd yelled at me in a sandstorm for losing a wrench. He used to say, "Every decision has a blast radius, Whitmore. Make sure you can live with the fallout." That advice suddenly felt less metaphorical. Marcus came in without knocking, holding a tablet. You asked for an overview of current projects. He set it on the desk and stood there like he wasn't sure whether to sit or salute. I gestured toward the chair. At ease, Hale. He smirked. Old habits die hard. The report was a mess of charts and acronyms. The company had several government contracts, some clean, some not so much. One line item stood out. Vigilant AI. Halted pending review. Why was this one stopped? I asked. Marcus hesitated. Falcon Dynamics filed a patent claim. They said the software design was too similar to one of theirs. And was it? He shook his head. No. But Falcon's lawyers are good at blurring lines. The Colonel was fighting it before he passed. I leaned back, connecting dots that hadn't been obvious before. So they file a claim, stall development, make the company look unstable, then push for a buyout. Classic play. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You sound like you've seen this before. I've seen ambushes, same principle, just less blood. He chuckled. You're not what I expected. Good, I said. Neither am I. Hausen. After he left, I kept staring at the project name. Vigilant. It wasn't just a product, it was what Langley was trying to protect. If that technology got into the wrong hands, Falcon could use it for anything. Autonomous targeting, surveillance, even black market sales. That's when I understood the real condition wasn't about proving I could run a company. It was about proving I wouldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. Around noon, Victoria called from her office. "You'll want to watch the news," she said. I turned on the monitor in the corner. Rebecca's face filled the screen. Perfect hair, perfect smile, standing in front of a row of microphones. The headline: Whitmore Properties partners with Falcon Dynamics on infrastructure project. My jaw tightened. The reporter asked her something about her sister. Rebecca laughed lightly and said, "Elena? She's doing, well, she's trying her best. We're proud of her transition." Transition, I muttered it, like I was a recovering alcoholic, not a veteran trying to rebuild her life. Victoria's voice came through the phone. "We'll need to handle this carefully. The media's already drawing a connection between her and Langley Defense." "Let them," I said. "If she wants to play PR games, I'll play strategy." I spent the rest of the afternoon in a quiet fury. I'd lost count of how many times Rebecca had used charm to cover her lies. The difference now was that she wasn't the only one with leverage. Marcus came by again later with an update. Falcon just scheduled a joint meeting request with the board for next week. They want to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Translation, I said. They think they can buy me. He grinned. "Everyone's got a price." "Not me." "Good," he said, "because they'll test that." I watched him leave and realized I didn't know whose side he was really on. He was too smart to be loyal to anyone for free. But for now, he was useful. That evening, when the office finally emptied, I opened Langley's personal safe. Victoria had given me the code earlier. Inside were a few mementos, an old compass, some medals, and a sealed envelope with my name written in his handwriting. Inside was a short note. "You'll need allies, but be careful which ones you make. The enemy wears expensive shoes." I folded the note and put it in my pocket. Then I stood there in the quiet office, the city glowing behind me, and realized I didn't feel like an imposter anymore. I felt like someone gearing up for a mission. Rebecca wanted control. Falcon wanted power. Both thought I was out of my depth. Maybe I was, but that didn't matter. You don't win fights by being ready. You win them by refusing to lose. The next morning, before anyone arrived, I called maintenance to have the company's internal servers audited. If Rebecca had her hands in Falcon's files, I needed to know how far her reach went. As the IT team started pulling data, one of them asked if I wanted to inform the board. I said no. If there's something rotten in the system, I'd rather see who panics first. By mid-morning, I was on my second cup of coffee, watching as the first batch of security logs came in. There were flagged entries, remote access attempts from unregistered devices, encrypted file transfers routed through unknown networks. The timestamps matched nights when the building was supposed to be empty. I leaned over the monitor and said quietly, "Got you." Victoria walked in just as I said it. "Got who?" I didn't answer right away. I just smiled faintly and said, "Let's just say someone's about to have a very bad week." V. She looked at me carefully, like she was starting to see the soldier behind the suit. "Just remember, this isn't a battlefield." I shrugged. "Sure it is. The weapons just look different." Outside the glass walls, New York buzzed with indifference cars, crowds, lights, all unaware that somewhere inside a high-rise office, a homeless veteran turned CEO was preparing for a war that didn't use bullets. The game was shifting. And whether I wanted to or not, I was already standing in the middle of it. By the time Monday rolled around, I'd already been labeled the experiment. That's what some of the senior staff whispered when they thought I couldn't hear them. The homeless veteran turned CEO, it made a great headline, but a lousy first impression in boardrooms full of people who spent more on cufflinks than I'd made in a year. It didn't bother me as much as it amused me. I'd been underestimated before. In war zones, it usually ended with me standing and the other guy not. In corporate America, it just meant I had to learn their weapons contracts, politics, image. The first real test came during the Monday strategy meeting. The room was filled with executives who clearly didn't want to be led by someone who'd once slept in her car. Their smiles were polite enough, but the tension was so thick you could cut it with a stapler. "All right," I said, scanning the room. "Let's talk about Falcon Dynamics. We all know they've been circling us since the colonel passed. Anyone here think that's a coincidence?" Nobody answered. One man, the CFO, a perfectly groomed guy named Paul Grant, shifted in his seat and said, "Falcon is one of our oldest partners. Miss Whitmore. It's normal they'd show interest in maintaining cooperation. Sure, I said. Like it's normal for a vulture to show interest in a dying animal. I rebel. A few people looked up. Paul didn't like that comparison. With respect, he said, you don't have experience with corporate strategy. With respect, I replied, you don't have experience with me. That shut him up for about 30 seconds. The rest of the meeting was the usual circus charts, projections, jargon no sane person would use in daily life. But I noticed something useful. Every time Falcon's name came up, certain people looked uncomfortable. That was intel. Afterward, Marcus found me in the hallway. You really enjoy poking the hornet's nest, don't you? I don't poke, I said. I flip the nest and see who runs. He grinned. You're going to give HR a heart attack. Good, I said. Means they're alive. I spent the next few days learning the company from the inside out. The engineers respected skill, not titles, so I earned their trust by asking the right questions and not pretending to know what I didn't. The accountants were another species entirely. They only respected numbers. So I stayed late, digging through ledgers until I could explain the company's balance sheet better than the CFO himself. The real challenge, though, was perception. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it, the judgment, the quiet disbelief that someone like me could belong in this glass tower. A couple of execs whispered about my past within earshot, probably thinking I'd ignore it. One afternoon, I caught two of them in the break room. One said, "You think she even knows how to use PowerPoint?" The other laughed. "Probably thinks Excel is a rifle scope." I stepped in just as they noticed me. For the record, I said, I used Excel to track supply chains across 3 continents under live fire. But you're right, it's not as dangerous as making coffee. They went pale. I poured my coffee, smiled, and walked out. Word spread fast after that. Nobody joked within earshot again. Marcus told me later, "You might not win them over with charm, but fear's a start." "Fear's reliable," I said. Charm fades. The only one who didn't seem impressed or intimidated was Victoria. She had a way of watching me that felt like she was measuring whether I'd crack. "You're adapting faster than expected," she said one evening as we reviewed contracts. "Survival skill," I told her. "You learn it when you've got nothing to fall back on." That. She nodded thoughtfully. "The colonel used to say you were too stubborn for your own good." I'm starting to see what he meant. Stubborn keeps you alive. "True," she said. "But it also paints a target." I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. Every decision I made was being dissected by the board. By Falcon. Maybe even by Rebecca. A few nights later, I stayed in the office again, going through archived financial transfers. Something caught my eye, repeated payments from a consulting firm in D.C. called Alden & Rowe. At first, they looked normal until I noticed the firm had no online presence and the payments started 2 months before Langley died. When I asked accounting about it the next morning, they froze. "Those were authorized by the colonel," Paul said quickly. "Show me the authorization." He hesitated. "Some of the files are missing." "Then find the ones that aren't," I said. That afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging. You're in over your head." I showed it to Marcus. He frowned. "That's subtle." "Yeah," I said. Almost polite. He leaned against the desk. "You really think your sister's involved?" "I know she is. I just don't know how deep." Marcus folded his arms. "If she's tied to Falcon, this goes beyond family drama. That's federal-level stuff." "I'm aware," I said. "And if she's mixed in, she's playing with fire." He gave me a look that was half respect, half concern. "You ever think maybe walking away's the smart move?" "Smart, maybe," I said. "But I didn't get here by being smart. I got here by surviving." That same day, I had to attend another shareholder event, a charity gala hosted by Langley Defense. The room was full of donors, politicians, and people who smiled too wide. I hated every second of it. Rebecca was there. Of course she was. She floated through the crowd like she owned the place, her diamond earrings catching the light, her laughter rehearsed. When she spotted me, her expression froze for a split second before settling into that fake warmth she'd perfected. "Elena," she said sweetly, kissing the air near my cheek. "I'm so glad you could make it." I kept my face neutral. "You always did like expensive parties." She smiled, but her eyes sharpened. "So I heard you've been busy. Big shoes to fill, huh?" "Yeah," I said. Unlike yours, they come with real responsibility. Her smile cracked just a little. Careful, sis. You wouldn't want to embarrass yourself in front of your investors. I leaned closer. Funny. That's exactly what I was about to tell you. For a moment, the air between us went cold. Then she laughed lightly, as if we were still sisters sharing an inside joke, but I could see it in her eyes, the same hunger for control that had always driven her. Later that night, Marcus approached me near the bar. That your sister? Unfortunately. She looks like someone who knows how to hide a knife behind a smile. I nodded. That's her one true talent. When I finally left the gala, I stepped into the cold night air and realized how quiet the city felt. Too quiet. I turned, scanning the street. A black car was parked half a block down. Its headlights flashed once before turning off. I stared for a long moment before walking to my own car. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, I wasn't going to give whoever was watching the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by something else, a calm, focused anger. Rebecca thought this was still the same old family rivalry, a petty feud over inheritance. She had no idea what she was up against now. Langley had given me a mission disguised as a gift, and whether the battlefield was sand or glass, I intended to finish what he started. The next few days moved like a field operation, precise, relentless, and full of people pretending not to panic. The IT audit I'd ordered was starting to uncover patterns no one wanted to explain. Logins from unregistered devices, encrypted file transfers, and data copied from our drone AI project to external servers. Whoever was doing it had access to everything and wasn't afraid of being caught. When I called a meeting to go over the findings, half the board showed up late, and the other half wouldn't make eye contact. That told me everything I needed to know. Someone inside this company is feeding information to Falcon Dynamics, I said. They're not even trying to cover their tracks anymore. Paul, the CFO, shifted uncomfortably. That's a serious accusation, Miss Whitmore. It's not an accusation, I said, tapping the folder in front of me. It's a summary of evidence. I opened the file and dropped a few printed screenshots on the table transaction records, timestamps, digital footprints. These IP addresses belong to Falcon's internal network. The transfers came from our own servers. A murmur went around the room. I watched their faces closely. 2 people looked genuinely shocked. The rest looked like they were rehearsing excuses. One executive, a woman named Diane from procurement, spoke first. You can't prove who sent those files. Maybe it was a hack. Sure, I said. And maybe my sister's suddenly charitable. The room went quiet. I hadn't planned to bring Rebecca into it that fast, but I wanted to see their reactions. It worked. Diane looked straight at Paul, and he flinched. Something you want to share? I asked him. Paul cleared his throat. Look, I don't know anything about your sister, but Falcon's been persistent. They've offered consulting fees, bonuses, even buyouts. Everyone's been approached. And what? Did you take it? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. After the meeting, Victoria cornered me in the hallway. You're walking a fine line. Accusing the board without proof could backfire. I've got enough proof, I said. I just don't have the whole picture yet. And your sister? She asked. She's the picture. That night, I called Rebecca. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding like she was in the middle of a dinner party. Well, this is a surprise, she said, her tone syrupy sweet. Did you run out of reporters to talk to? Cut the act, I said. How deep are you in with Falcon? There was a long pause. Then that familiar little laugh, the one she used when she was cornered. Falcon's a business partner, not a secret lover, Elena. You should be thanking me. If I wanted, I could help you make a deal that would set you for life. I don't want a deal, I said. I want to know why Falcon's using your name to access our files. Another pause, sharper this time. Careful, sis. You're throwing around big accusations. Not accusations, I said. Confirmation. I could hear her exhale. You think you can play in their world, Elena? You're out of your depth. Falcon isn't just some company they own half the people you're working with. That's fine, I said. I only need one of them to break. She chuckled quietly. You haven't changed at all. Always the soldier, always trying to win some moral war no one else cares about. Yeah, I said. And you're still the one hiding behind people who do the fighting for you. She hung up. When I lowered the phone, My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From clarity. The kind that makes everything painfully simple. Rebecca was working with Falcon. That was certain now. What I didn't know was how far she'd gone. The next morning, Marcus came into my office with a file. "You're not going to like this," he said. "That's becoming a trend," I told him. He laid out photo security stills from one of our warehouses. Rebecca, standing next to a man I didn't recognize, shaking hands. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. "Falcon's logistics manager," Marcus said. "Name's Jordan Rice. He used to work here. Langley fired him 5 years ago for selling internal designs." That. "So why's my sister meeting him?" "Either they're planning a hostile takeover," Marcus said, "or they're already doing it." The photos made my stomach twist. Rebecca wasn't just helping Falcon, she was physically inside our facilities. That meant someone let her in. I leaned back in my chair. "So the mole isn't just a board member. It's someone on the inside." Marcus nodded. "My money's on finance. Every leak traces back to their department." He wasn't wrong. Paul had been twitchy since day one, and money trails always tell the truth. I told Victoria to dig deeper into Falcon's financial records. She had contacts at the SEC and knew how to read between the lines. 2 days later, she came back with a report that made everything click. Falcon had transferred nearly $3 million to a real estate development partner registered under Whitmore Properties LLC, Rebecca's company. The payments were labeled as consulting fees. Now, Victoria set the file on my desk and crossed her arms. "That's your link." I looked at the document, feeling that familiar burn in my chest, the one that comes right before you do something irreversible. "She's laundering money through her company," I said quietly. "Looks that way," Victoria replied. "And using Falcon's contracts to do it?" I stood up. "Then she's using Langley Defense as her piggy bank." "No." Marcus walked in halfway through our conversation, holding a cup of coffee like he already knew it was bad news. "Let me guess, Rebecca's not just in bed with Falcon, she's building the nest." "Pretty much," I said. He set the coffee down and said, "So what's your play?" "Expose them," I said. "Publicly. With evidence." "That's risky," Victoria warned. "If you move too soon, they'll bury you in lawsuits before the truth gets out." "Then I'll move smart," I said. "They can't fight what they can't see coming." Marcus smirked. "Now you're thinking like a CEO." I didn't answer. I was already planning my next step. That night, I drove to the Arlington warehouse, where the security footage had been taken. The guards recognized me and waved me through. Inside, the place was quiet. Too quiet for a facility supposedly under heavy work orders. I walked the aisles between stacked crates and equipment, listening for movement. In Langley's day, everything had a purpose here. Now, it felt staged, like someone was keeping it alive just enough to justify access. Near the back, I found what I was looking for. A locked room with a new keypad system. Not part of our standard security. Marcus had given me an override code, so I keyed it in and waited. The door clicked open. Inside were several storage drives, labeled Vigilant Archive. I connected one to my laptop. The directory was empty, not deleted, wiped. Someone had scrubbed the entire project. I pulled up the audit logs. The last access entry was from a terminal registered to, of course, Paul Grant. I copied everything to an encrypted drive and left before anyone could notice. By the time I got back to my car, my phone buzzed with another message. "You should have stayed out of this." No number, no name. But this time, it came with a photo. A recent one, taken outside my apartment building. I stared at it, jaw tight, adrenaline kicking in like it used to before a firefight. Whoever they were done hiding behind threats. I started the engine, the sound echoing through the empty lot. The city lights glowed in the distance, cold and sharp. Somewhere out there, Rebecca thought she'd already won. She hadn't even realized I'd stopped playing her game. I was building my own. The morning after that message, I didn't bother pretending it was business as usual. I showed up at Langley Defense early, dressed sharp enough to remind everyone I wasn't the soldier they thought they could intimidate. Inside, the tension was almost visible. News of the audit had spread. You could feel it in the forced smiles and hushed side conversations that stopped when I walked by. I called an emergency meeting. The board members filed in, some irritated, some nervous, one already sweating. Marcus stood near the door, arms crossed, watching everyone like a hawk. "Last night," I began, "someone thought it was a good idea to threaten me with photos of my home. That got their attention. So, here's how this is going to go. I don't care who sent it, but whoever's responsible for these leaks, you have 12 hours to come clean before I turn every bite of this company inside out. And when I do, you won't just lose your job, you'll lose your freedom." Paul raised a hand, trying for calm. "Elena, this isn't the way to handle." I cut him off. "Paul, I found your login credentials attached to the wiped Vigilant servers. You don't get to tell me how to handle anything." The color drained from his face. The rest of the board stared at him like they'd just realized they were sitting next to a live grenade. Victoria spoke up, her tone icy. "Mr. Grant, do you deny accessing those servers?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, then exhaled through his nose. "I didn't have a choice," he said quietly. "Falcon was already in. Rebecca made it clear I could cooperate or lose everything." I leaned forward. "You sold out this company because my sister told you to?" He looked at me with a mix of guilt and defiance. "You think this is just about you? Falcon owns half this industry. They would have buried Langley long before you showed up. At least this way some of us get to keep our jobs." "Interesting survival strategy," I said. "Sell the family, save the furniture." Half. Marcus moved to the corner of the room, quietly texting someone. I caught his eye. He gave the faintest nod. Backup was in place. Paul shifted again. "You don't understand how powerful Falcon is. You can't fight them." I smiled. "I don't need to fight them. I just have to expose them." He laughed, a humorless sound. "Expose them? You'll end up dead. Then they'll have to get in line." Victoria called security to escort him out. He didn't resist, just muttered something about how I'd regret this. But I'd already decided I wasn't going to live in fear of threats, digital or otherwise. Once the room cleared, Marcus walked over. "You really think he's telling the whole truth?" "No," I said. "He's protecting Rebecca. There's more he's not saying." We spent the rest of the day digging through his communications, his bank accounts, anything that could tie Falcon to Rebecca. By evening, we had enough to confirm he'd been funneling company funds into shell accounts connected to her real estate firm. Victoria was preparing to take it to the authorities, but I stopped her. "Not yet," I said. "If we go public now, Falcon will spin it before the truth hits the surface. We need something irrefutable, something even their lawyers can't bury." Marcus frowned. "You're talking about the original Vigilant prototype." "Exactly," I said. "Langley's final version, the one he never filed through official channels." "That thing's practically a myth," Marcus said. "The colonel had it air-gapped and hidden off-site." "Then we find it," I said. "Because if Falcon gets to it first, this whole thing's over." Marcus exhaled. "You really are your uncle's soldier." "Wrong, Langley," I said. "Just a Whitmore who finally stopped backing down." We traced the last record of the prototype to an old Langley defense testing facility in Virginia decommissioned years ago. It wasn't exactly on the company books anymore, but Victoria found enough paperwork to authorize entry. When we arrived, the place looked like every abandoned military site you've ever seen. Chain link fences, peeling paint, and an eerie quiet that felt almost staged. Marcus parked near the entrance, scanning the area. "Looks clear," he said, stepping out with a flashlight. "You sure about this?" "Not even remotely," I said. "Let's move." Inside, dust hung in the air like fog. We passed rows of old machinery, blueprints pinned to corkboards, and boxes of obsolete components. It was like walking through Langley's mind, organized chaos with purpose behind every pile. We finally reached a reinforced door marked R and D, restricted access. The lock had been broken recently. Marcus exchanged a look with me. "Guess we're not the first ones here," he muttered. We pushed the door open. The lab beyond was wrecked, papers scattered, monitors smashed, cables torn out, but in the center of the room stood a single terminal, still humming faintly. I crossed over and tapped the keyboard. The screen flickered to life, displaying the words, "Vigilant AI, System Integrity Compromised." Before I could react, Marcus grabbed my arm. "Elena, we've got company." Footsteps echoed down the corridor. At least 2 people moving with precision. Professionals. Falcon's cleanup crew, I whispered. We ducked behind a workstation as the door creaked open. 2 men entered, both armed, both wearing Falcon security badges. They swept the room methodically, talking quietly into their radios. Langley's files were supposed to be gone, one said. Check the drives. If anything's recoverable, take it. They moved toward the terminal. Marcus gave me a look that said this is about to get ugly. I nodded. When the first man leaned down to pull the drive, I stepped out, gun raised, hands where I can see them. He froze. The other one spun toward me, reaching for his holster, but Marcus moved faster, disarming him in one motion that looked straight out of a combat drill. Within seconds, both men were on the floor. Marcus dragged one of them up by the collar. Who sent you? The man spat blood, sneering. You think you can scare Falcon? Marcus glanced at me. Permission to prove him wrong? Not yet, I said. We need him talking, not unconscious. The man laughed. You think you're saving something, lady? The deal's already done. Rebecca signed off this morning. My heart dropped. Signed off on what? He smiled through split lips. Acquisition. Falcon owns Langley Defense now. Marcus slammed him back down. Liar. But the man wasn't lying. I could see it in his face. I grabbed his radio and spoke into it. This is Whitmore. You tell your boss if he thinks he's taking my company, he better be ready for a fight he won't survive. Static hissed back. Then a voice I recognized cut through it, smooth, smug, unmistakably Rebecca's. Oh, Elena, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Still trying to play hero? You were never built for this world. Go home before you get hurt. I stared at the radio for a long second before setting it down gently. Marcus, I said quietly. Download whatever's left of Vigilant. Now. He got to work, pulling data from the terminal as I stood watch. My pulse hammered, but my mind was clear. Rebecca thought she'd won by signing a few papers and cutting a few deals. She still didn't understand war isn't over when the ink dries. As Marcus finished the transfer, we heard engines outside. More vehicles arriving. Too many. We've got to go, he said. We slipped out a side exit, sprinting across the empty lot to the car. Headlights flared behind us as we pulled onto the road. For a long stretch, neither of us spoke. The drive was silent except for the hum of the tires and the weight of what we'd just heard. Finally, Marcus said, If Falcon really bought us out, it's going to hit the news by morning. Then we get ahead of it, I said. We still have the Vigilant data, and now we've got proof they used corporate espionage to do it. That. He looked at me sideways. You planning to go public? Not yet, I said, staring at the highway lights. First, I'm going to make Rebecca tell the truth herself. The hum of the car grew louder, steady, relentless, carrying us toward the city where every secret was about to come due. By sunrise, the entire boardroom was in chaos. The news had broken before breakfast. Falcon Dynamics acquires Langley Defense Systems. The headlines were everywhere, complete with smiling press photos of Rebecca shaking hands with Falcon's CEO, Marcus Chen. The articles praised her business acumen and strategic leadership in uniting American defense innovation. Meanwhile, my phone was buzzing nonstop with reporters asking for comment. I didn't answer a single call. I was too busy printing copies of everything we downloaded from the Vigilant terminal, the data Falcon thought they'd erased. Every drive, every file, every transaction tied to the sale. Rebecca hadn't just partnered with Falcon, she'd stolen classified research to sweeten the deal. When I arrived at Langley HQ, security tried to stop me at the door. We were told you're no longer authorized entry, ma'am, the guard said, clearly nervous. Who told you that? I asked. Miss Rebecca Whitmore. Effective this morning. I gave a cold smile. Then you'll want to call legal, because that's about to change in about 5 minutes. I walked past him, ignoring the protests, and hit the elevator button. When the doors opened on the executive floor, half the staff froze. The rest pretended to type. It didn't matter. I knew fear when I saw it. Inside the boardroom, Rebecca was already there, dressed in one of those overpriced suits she used to mock me for not affording. Hair immaculate, confidence radiating like a weapon. Falcon's CEO sat beside her, a smirking man with perfect posture and shark eyes. Elena, she said, smiling as though this was a family reunion. You're up early. I couldn't sleep, I said. Something about my company being sold while I was still running it. Marcus Chen interjected smoothly. Correction, formerly running it. The acquisition was fully legal and approved by the majority of the board. Funny, I said, considering the majority of the board was compromised through bribes, threats, and falsified records. I've got the proof right here. I dropped a thick folder onto the table. The pages fanned out like a stack of grenades. Rebecca's smile twitched. What is this supposed to be? Every transaction from Falcon to your little real estate firm, I said evenly. Every consulting payment, every false invoice, every shell company tied back to you. Oh, and the vigilant AI data you wiped? I recovered that too, including the metadata showing you accessed it illegally. The color drained from her face, just slightly, before she caught herself. You think you can scare me with half-baked accusations? No, I said. I'm going to scare you with the truth. Victoria stepped in then, placing another folder beside mine. We've already filed a motion with the Department of Defense to freeze all Falcon-related contracts pending investigation. Once they confirm this data breach, every deal you made will be void. The room went silent. Rebecca looked around, expecting support from her allies. None came. Even the executives who'd backed her earlier suddenly found the floor very interesting. Falcon's CEO leaned back, unbothered. You realize what you're doing, Miss Whitmore? You're accusing two multi-million-dollar corporations of criminal activity? That's a dangerous game. I've played worse games, I said. And unlike you, I don't bluff. He smiled thinly. You won't win this. Maybe not, I said. But when the Pentagon starts investigating, I won't be the one explaining why a foreign-backed firm has access to defense-grade AI systems. That was the first time his expression actually changed. Rebecca stood abruptly. This meeting is over. No, I said. It's not. She froze when I stepped closer. You've been trying to control everything your whole life, Rebecca. Mom, Dad, me. You thought you could humiliate me and come out clean again. But this time, you didn't just betray family, you betrayed national security. That's not ambition. That's treason. She laughed, but it was hollow. You think anyone's going to believe your little sob story? You were homeless 3 months ago. A charity case the colonel dragged back into the spotlight. That's true, I said. I was nothing. Until he gave me a second chance. And you? You had everything and threw it away for greed. Rebecca's eyes darted toward the board members. She's unstable. She's lying. Marcus Hale walked into the room right on cue, holding a tablet. Actually, she's not. He connected it to the projector, and the screen lit up with a video feed security footage from the Virginia facility. It showed Rebecca and Jordan Reese meeting in the warehouse, exchanging a drive and signing documents. Marcus looked at her. Nice outfit that night, by the way. The silence that followed was absolute. Rebecca's composure shattered. You bugged me? No, I said. You bugged yourself. Those cameras were installed under Langley's security system. Guess you forgot the colonel didn't trust anyone either. Victoria handed me a document. Elena, as acting CEO, you can move to void the sale immediately and request federal intervention. Already done, I said, signing the paper with steady hands. Rebecca's voice rose, desperate now. You can't do this to me. You think you're better than me just because you played soldier and got lucky? No, I said quietly. I'm better than you because I learned the difference between power and purpose. Security entered the room a moment later. Victoria nodded to them. Miss Rebecca Whitmore is to be escorted off company property pending federal investigation. Rebecca's voice cracked as they led her out. You'll regret this, Elena. You'll regret everything. I didn't answer. Watching her struggle against the guards felt less like victory and more like closure, the kind that burns and heals at the same time. When the doors closed, the room exhaled collectively. Falcon's CEO stood slowly, face unreadable. You think this ends with her? You've just made powerful enemies. Good, I said. Means I'm finally where I belong. He left without another word. The moment he was gone, I turned to Marcus and Victoria. Get the legal team ready. I want full cooperation with the feds. If Falcon's dirty, we're going to clean house. Marcus nodded. You realize this is going to be all over the media within hours. Let it, I said. Let them see what accountability looks like for once. He studied me for a moment, something like admiration in his eyes. You're not the same woman I found on that street corner. No, I said. She didn't survive. I did. By afternoon, federal agents had arrived. collecting statements and evidence. The board remained silent, too afraid to challenge me now. Victoria handled the legal end, Marcus coordinated with cybersecurity, and I stood in Langley's office, his office looking out at the city he'd built from nothing. The portrait of him still hung on the wall. I studied it, the faint smile under that stern expression, and finally understood what he'd meant in his letter. You'll be tested by ghosts, by greed, and by your own fear. He'd been right about all of it, but he'd also known I'd make it through. When the agents finished their sweep, one of them turned to me. We'll be in touch, Miss Whitmore. I suspect you just saved a lot of people from a very big problem. I nodded, but I didn't feel triumphant. Just grounded. Like the fight wasn't over, but at least it was finally on my terms. Marcus appeared beside me, hands in his pockets. So, he said, glancing at the skyline, what happens now? I didn't answer right away. I was still watching the horizon, the same view Langley had seen every morning. Now? I said finally. Now we build something that's actually worth defending. Marcus smiled faintly. Sounds like a mission. It is, I said. And for once, it's mine. Outside, the city buzzed, unaware of how close it had come to losing everything. Inside, the pieces of the old empire were finally starting to fall into place. Not for money or revenge, but for something far rarer. Redemption built on truth and steel. The next few days felt less like victory and more like the aftermath of a long deployment, the kind where you win the battle but still have to walk through the wreckage to see what's left standing. The headlines came first. Langley Defense CEO exposes corporate espionage. Falcon Dynamics under federal investigation. Rebecca Whitmore faces criminal charges. Reporters camped outside the building. Government agents requested interviews. Investors called nonstop, half of them offering congratulations, the other half demanding reassurance that their money wasn't about to vanish. It was chaos, but this time it was mine to manage. Marcus handled the technical side of things, securing our systems and recovering what was left of the Vigilant project. Victoria ran legal operations like a general leading a cleanup mission, efficient, sharp, and merciless. And me? I focused on rebuilding the one thing money and power could never buy: trust. The first order of business was addressing the employees. We gathered in the main atrium, hundreds of faces, some skeptical, some relieved, a few still angry. I stood on the platform Langley used to give his old company briefings. The same place he'd once said, "Service is only as strong as the people who still believe in it." I know this company's been through hell, I began. You've had leaders who lied to you, deals that put you at risk, and headlines that made you question everything we stand for. I won't insult you with promises or PR lines. What I will do is this: every contract, every project, every decision from now on will be transparent. If we can't defend it in daylight, we don't do it. Yeah? The room stayed quiet, but no one walked out. That was enough for me. After the meeting, one of the engineers came up, a young woman, maybe late 20s, wearing a faded Langley Defense patch on her jacket. "Ma'am," she said, "my dad worked here back when the colonel ran things. He used to say integrity was our real product. Thank you for bringing that back." That one sentence hit harder than all the headlines combined. Outside, Rebecca's world was collapsing in real time. The FBI had frozen her assets, the media uncovered her financial ties to Falcon, and her name was plastered across every news channel. Watching it unfold felt strange, like watching a movie I'd already seen the ending to. She called me once, from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. "Elena," she said, her voice small for the first time in years. "Rebecca," I replied evenly. "Enjoying your 15 minutes? "Don't do that," she said. "You think I planned for it to end like this? I didn't have a choice. They had me cornered." "There's always a choice," I said. "You just kept picking the one that paid best." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You were always Dad's favorite. Langley's favorite. You get everything. And you got chances," I interrupted. "More than you deserved, but you burned every bridge that didn't benefit you." Her tone hardened again, like she'd found her mask. "You think they'll let you keep that company? Falcon will bounce back, and when they do, they'll come for you." "Let them," I said. "I'll be waiting." I hung up. Victoria later confirmed Rebecca had agreed to a plea deal reduced sentence in exchange for testifying against Falcon's executives. It was poetic, in a way. She'd spent her life manipulating people, and now she'd finally been manipulated by the system she thought she could outsmart. The following week, Langley Defense hosted a press conference to formally announce its restructuring. Marcus and I stood side by side as reporters fired off questions. "What happens to Vigilant AI?" one asked. I answered without hesitation. "It stays where it belongs with us, but it won't be used for weapons development. The Colonel built it to protect, not destroy. We're reprogramming it for disaster response, search and rescue, and border safety. If it's going to change the world, it's going to do it the right way." That got a round of applause not from the press but from the employees standing in the back. Afterward, Marcus joined me in the office. "You realize you just turned a defense system into a humanitarian tool?" I smiled faintly. "Yeah. And I can already hear the investors panicking." He chuckled. "You know, for a CEO, you're terrible at making people rich." "I'm not trying to make them rich," I said. "I'm trying to make them proud." Victoria entered with a document folder. "The board approved your Veterans Initiative," she said. "Langley Foundation for Reintegration Job Training, Housing Programs, Mental Health Resources. It's already trending online." That one caught me off guard. "People actually like it?" She smiled. "Apparently, Homeless CEO Helps Homeless Veterans is a story America can get behind." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're a PR goldmine now. Bet you didn't see that coming." "Yeah," I said dryly. "Finally found a way to monetize trauma." Victoria laughed, which was rare. "You earned it, Elena. You turned this place around." "Not yet," I said, "but maybe we're finally facing the right direction." Over the next few months, the transformation was real. The toxic executives were gone, replaced by people who actually believed in what Langley had stood for. Falcon Dynamics lost half its contracts, its CEO resigned, and the investigation turned up enough evidence to keep their lawyers busy for a decade. As for Rebecca, her sentence came quietly, 18 months in federal custody, followed by community service and a lifetime ban from corporate boards. I didn't attend the hearing. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I spent that morning visiting the Veterans Center we'd opened in Arlington, the first Langley Foundation project. The halls were filled with laughter, arguments, and the smell of burnt coffee. It felt alive, real. One of the guys, a former Marine named Carter, recognized me. "You're that lady from the news," he said, shaking my hand. "The one who told off Congress on live TV." "That's me," I said. "You liking the program?" "Hell yeah," he said. "Feels good to work again. My kid's even talking to me now." He walked away before I could respond, and I just stood there for a second, letting it sink in. This was the real inheritance. Not the money, not the title, not the building with my name on the wall. It was purpose. The thing I'd been chasing without knowing it. When I got back to the office later, Marcus was waiting with 2 coffees. "You missed the morning meeting," he said. "I was visiting the real shareholders," I replied. He grinned. "You're dangerous when you're sentimental." "Don't worry," I said. "It'll pass." We sat there for a while, watching the city through the glass. Langley Defense reborn, rebuilt, and scarred in all the right places. Victoria knocked once and leaned in. "Congressional committee wants your statement next week," she said, "about the Falcon scandal." I nodded. "Tell them I'll be there. But I'm not coming to talk about Falcon. I'm coming to talk about responsibility." Marcus raised his cup in a mock toast. "To new wars." I smiled. "No? To finally ending one?" "Nay." He laughed quietly, and for the first time in a long time, I did too. Outside, the city moved like it always did, fast, cold, and unbothered. But this time, I didn't feel like I was fighting it. I felt like I was finally part of something bigger, something that might actually last. The storm had passed, but the mission never really ended. It just changed shape, trading bullets for blueprints and revenge for rebuilding. And honestly, that was a trade I could live with. The year moved quietly after the storm. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, just steady, earned, Langley Defense, now rebranded as Whitmore Langley Systems, had found its footing again. The press moved on, investors calmed down, and for the first time in a long time, I could walk into the building without wondering who was plotting behind the next corner. The Veterans Program had grown faster than anyone expected. What started as a single center in Arlington expanded into 6 states within a year. Former soldiers became engineers, logistics specialists, and even company leaders. We didn't just give them jobs, we gave them belonging. Most mornings, I arrived before sunrise. The city outside my office window always looked different in that early light. Less like chaos, more like potential. Marcus liked to joke that I didn't know how to sit still. He wasn't wrong. Normal people would take a vacation, he said one morning, leaning against my office door with his usual half smile. Normal people don't rebuild defense empires out of bankruptcy, I said. He laughed. Fair point. He walked in, dropping a folder on my desk. We finished testing the new Vigilant update. It passed every security check. Good, I said. And the Civilian Partnership Program? He nodded. Signed this morning. FEMA's integrating our drone system for disaster zones. They want us to oversee deployment next month. Perfect, I said, scanning the paperwork. That's the first time Vigilant has been used for saving people instead of tracking them. I think the colonel would have liked that. Marcus's expression softened. He'd have been proud. Hell, he'd probably be yelling at you for not charging more. I smiled faintly. Yeah, that sounds like him. Outside the office, the world moved on. Falcon Dynamics had dissolved after its CEO's indictment. Rebecca was released early for cooperating. And last I heard, she was living somewhere in Arizona, working in community outreach a sentence. In its own way. I never reached out. Some wounds just needed distance to heal. Every now and then, I'd get a letter from someone who'd read about my story. They weren't fan letters, they were survival letters. Notes from veterans, single mothers, people who'd lost everything and were trying to start again. They always ended the same way. If you could make it, maybe I can too. That's what made me realize the story had stopped being about me a long time ago. One afternoon, I drove out to the old Virginia testing site, the same place where everything had almost ended. The building had been gutted and converted into a training facility for new recruits and engineers. The sign out front read, Langley Innovation Center. Inside, the walls were lined with photos Langley shaking hands with soldiers, blueprints of early designs, and one new photo that made me stop. It was me, standing beside a group of veterans at the Arlington opening. Someone had framed it under the quote, "You don't rebuild what you lost. You build what's next." Marcus had added that line, apparently. He never admitted it, but I knew his handwriting anywhere. As I walked the halls, I heard laughter from the workshop, 2 mechanics arguing over drone calibration. It sounded like life, like purpose. I paused in the doorway, listening, remembering what silence used to sound like when I was sleeping in my car, counting coins for coffee. That version of me felt like someone else entirely, a ghost who'd walked through fire and didn't realize she'd already made it out. Later that week, Victoria invited me to speak at a defense symposium in D.C., the kind of event where everyone wore perfect suits and spoke in acronyms. I almost turned it down, but she said, they need to hear what leadership looks like when it comes from the ground up. So I went. The stage lights were harsh, the audience full of CEOs, generals, and senators. I stood at the podium with no script, just a few notes. I'm not going to talk to you about defense budgets or technology, I began. You all know those numbers better than I do. What I will talk about is the people behind them, the ones who don't get their names in the news, the veterans who came home and couldn't find their way back into the world, the employees who stayed loyal when their bosses didn't, the ones who still believe integrity matters, even when it doesn't make money. I paused, looking out over the crowd. This company survived betrayal, greed, and everything that can rot an institution from the inside, but we didn't fix it with lawyers or PR. We fixed it by remembering who we serve. The moment you forget that whether you're a CEO or a soldier, you stop leading and start performing. The applause came slowly at first, then built until it filled the hall. Afterward, people lined up to shake my hand. Some offered partnerships, others just wanted to say thank you. But the only thing that stuck with me was a young woman in uniform who said quietly, "You made me want to stay." When I got back to Arlington that night, I stopped by the Veterans Center again. The sun was setting, the sky streaked in that sharp red that always reminded me of the desert. Inside, the rec room was full guys playing cards, someone tuning a guitar, laughter echoing off the walls. One of the older vets, Tom, an army mechanic who never stopped calling me captain, looked up from his seat. "You here to check on us again, boss?" "Something like that," I said. He grinned. "You ever gonna slow down?" "Not likely." He nodded approvingly. "Didn't think so." I sat with them for a while, trading stories that didn't feel like war stories anymore, just stories about life, bad coffee, and the weird ways people find hope. When I finally left, the night air was cool, the streets quiet. I got in my car and drove toward the city lights. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't chasing anything anymore. Langley's words still echoed in my mind. "You'll be tested by men in suits, by ghosts from your past, and by your own fear." He'd been right, but he'd left out one thing: what comes after the test. What comes after is purpose. Not the kind you're given, but the kind you build piece by piece out of mistakes, pain, and stubborn survival. Back at the office, Marcus was still working, of course. I caught him staring at the skyline. "You ever think we'd make it here?" he asked. "Not for a second," I said. He laughed softly. "Guess that's why we did." The lights from the city reflected off the glass, stretching endless and bright. For the first time, I felt peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the kind that comes when you finally stop running from who you used to be. People always ask me how it felt to inherit $47 million. The truth is, the money didn't change anything. What changed me was the responsibility that came with it, the weight of turning survival into something useful. Rebecca once said I'd never belong in her world. She was right. I built my own instead. And maybe that's the real legacy: not revenge, not redemption, but proving that the past doesn't decide who you become. You do. The office lights dimmed automatically as I stood by the window, watching the city pulse with life. Somewhere below, someone was starting over, same as I once had. And if they were lucky or stubborn enough, they'd figure out what I finally did. You don't get stronger by winning. You get stronger by refusing to stay broken.